now um, live.
All right, excellent. Welcome. Good evening, everyone, to the Discipline Matrix Committee. We're meeting this evening, Wednesday, November 13th, and just want to welcome everyone. I'm going to pick up off the busy work where we left off last week. And I know, Captain Hubbard, you had provided to us all the document. So just wanted to welcome everyone around the Zoom screen. Let me check to see if there's any community members, no attendees other than us right now at the moment. But yeah, I mean, without further ado, we could just go ahead and jump into things.
Okay, let me pull up my screen here. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Deacon Lyles shared a story, LAPD. Provided the link here for those who wanted to read it, but talked about LAPD's gender bias. So if you're interested in learning more about that, it is here. Probably, let me see if I can put this in the chat room for those who want to read it. Give me a moment, please. Okay. All right, that should work. Okay. We talked, so I'm going to go over the deliverables. These date back 2 weeks ago, but there has been some updates. So 234.24, loyalty and esprit de corps. This elaborates more on a commander and manager's responsibilities. So it says commanders and managers are responsible for cultivating loyalty and esprit de corps by implementing strategies that build team unity and trust. They achieve this through critical thinking, observing and providing feedback, effective budgeting, discipline, and structured planning. These practices align the team with the department's mission and purpose, establishing a standard for all members. Commanders and managers must set an example, fostering a culture of integrity and accountability. Through transparent decision-making and ethical actions, they demonstrate a steadfast commitment to ethical policing and inspire others to uphold these values. All members are expected, those are the major changes, but I'll go through this again. All members are expected to cultivate loyalty and unity within the department, to the city of Oakland, and most importantly, to the oath of office and police code of ethics. Esprit de corps refers to a shared pride, morale, and sense of purpose among members of the OPD. Fostering a positive and team-oriented culture means building morale, encouraging motivation, and recognizing good work to promote teamwork and a positive attitude, creating unity, ensuring all members feel included, respected, and aligned with the department's mission and goals, encouraging loyalty, promoting commitment to the department and its mission while upholding the oath of office and constitutional values. Loyalty must be directed toward the oath of office and the Constitution, not blind loyalty to the department that conflicts with the community's trust or leads to ignoring misconduct. All right, so how does that look to everyone?
Excuse me.
I think it looks fine to me.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah, no, it looks good. I'm sorry, I was just giving it one last
Yeah.
peek.
Thank you. Yeah, that we've been through many iterations of that, so that looks a lot better from where we came from. Great. Okay. Conduct towards other, demeanor. I'll read through this again, but the big change comes at the end. We talk about just if I'll just give you background again. So this section spoke inwardly, as in how we treat each other, which is important, but didn't have much to how we treat the public. And currently our practice is if an officer is rude towards a community member, that this is the section we use. So it is very relevant to how we operate today. But now we're incorporating community language in there. Members shall perform their duties attentively and courteously, you know what I'm saying, avoiding rude, threatening, harsh, insulting, insolent, or demeaning language, and they shall maintain a professional bearing regardless of provocation to do otherwise. Members shall treat superior officers, subordinates, and peers with respect. They shall be courteous and civil at all times in their relationships with one another and shall avoid any inappropriate conduct. All persons except the very youthful and those known personally by the member or employee shall always be addressed by their appropriate title, followed by their last name. When on duty and in the presence of other superior officers shall be referred to by rank title. Members and employees shall attend to requests from the public quickly and accurately, avoiding unnecessary referral to other parts of the department. Orders from superior to subordinate members and employees shall be given civilly without profane or derogatory language. All right, so this is the big change. All members and employees are expected to show equal respect and consideration for every community member, regardless of their status or role. This includes addressing individuals with respectful titles such as sir or ma'am, and avoiding slang or overly casual language that could detract from professionalism. Members must demonstrate empathy. I know we had a big discussion about that. I didn't remove it, but I did define it further. I hope I captured everything. So members must demonstrate empathy by embodying kindness, courtesy, professionalism, promptness, responsiveness, helpfulness, and active listening. Additionally, they should uphold principles of procedural justice, including giving a voice to others, fostering trust, showing respect, and remaining neutral, especially when interacting with individuals under stress, whether as victims, witnesses, or subjects of a crime. Members shall model this behavior consistently, avoiding actions that suggest they are above the law.
I still have my same problem with the word empathy. I just want to stress that in order for me to be a professional and courteous and responsive police officer, I do not have to empathize with the victim or the perpetrator. You just don't have to do that. And to say that you must do that just gives the individual officer who is maybe called up for violating some element of this section, an argument to defend himself. I acted the way I acted because I don't have to feel like they feel. I can give you stories. I think the last time I was a manager in the Berkeley Police Department, the very last night, there were 4 shootings that I had to handle. And in one shooting, a young man was killed on 67th and San Pablo. He actually had on a bulletproof vest on backwards, which means he had nothing on, you know. And they came by, rival group came by, shot him and killed him. I was there. I saw his body. You know, I was sad that the guy was killed. Did I empathize with him? No, I did not. And I think most police officers may feel the same way. You know, why are you out here selling dope in my community? Why are you out here creating all of this violence? You know, I'm gonna be professional. I'm gonna try to find out who did this and try to keep the peace. But do I empathize with you? No, I do not. And here you say they must empathize. It's just a problem that we don't need. The paragraph that you wrote, members must demonstrate empathy by embodying, just take empathy by out. The members should demonstrate should demonstrate kindness, courtesy, professionalism, prompt. That's what we want. We're not demanding that any police officer has to feel like the person who is committing the crime or a victim of the crime. You don't have to feel like them to do your job.
Can you hear me? Can you
Yes.
hear
Yes, we
me?
can.
Oh,
Yes,
okay.
please.
So sorry, I'm in my car. Okay. Is this more about tone and tenor in terms of how you engage the public? When we talk about being rude, that's subjective. Officer may not feel that he was rude. He was just telling everybody to back up in a very stern way.
Sure.
So, you know, a lot of this is subject to interpretation, subjectivity. So I think we're talking more about tone and tenor as we engage with one another. You said this has to do with how officers speak to one another and also how officers speak to the public. Is that what I heard?
Well,
Correct.
the problem with the original language is it didn't really address our interaction with the public, but we use this section if an officer's demeanor is a violation of policy. So now we added this to, and it includes now public interaction.
Well, again, the whole thing about empathy in situations that uh, uh, Deacon Lyles has described, and only he can perhaps impart to us what it means to be an officer and have empathy. So I'm leaving that alone. But in terms of tone and tenor of how we engage officer to officer and officer to the public, I think it is a matter of tone and tenor. And I don't know if we can actually insert early on that this is a matter of tone and tenor. Hollering at people, is that necessary? Sometimes it is to you know, engage above the din of all the voices. But tone, if you're saying, you know, snarling at someone and speaking pejoratively to someone, that's a different thing. So it's, you know, it's all about tone and tenor, in my opinion.
Yeah, and thanks for adding that there, because I think it's appropriate to maybe name it a little earlier. And I agree. I think, you know, Deacon Lyles keeps on bringing up really good points that I think we do need to be sensitive to. And I think if we just simplify that language as well, you know, take the subjectivity out of empathy, members should demonstrate kindness. Yeah, I mean, it's straightforward. That's what it is right there. And Ms. Marsh, I think, you know, the origins of this conversation as well is that, you know, folks could be professional but still be rude or still, you know, leave a bad impression of the public. So we wanted to kind of like tick it up a notch, right, in terms of tone and tenor. But I also think that what we didn't have here before, Captain, was the list of descriptive words, right? The kindness, the courtesy, professionalism. I think that really gets to what we were aiming for. So if removing empathy kind of removes the ambiguity out of things, it just makes it real straightforward in terms of what we're looking for as a minimum standard of customer service, minimum standard of how we engage, of what this professional, you know, professionalism and professional courtesy looks like. Then I think we're good with that. I don't think we need to. I think the idea and our North Star was to try to get to a point where we had a touch above just being professional, right? And just really how do we put a personal touch to some of our tone and tenor? And I think you captured it in the description. So I don't think we need to keep on nailing down the empathy. I think it was a good placeholder to remind us of where we wanted to get to. But I also agree with Deacon Lyles around just removing it all together. And I see that you crossed it out now too. So
Let me say this one last thing. I got, and I hope I'm correct. I got the inference that this section would be used to say, this is exactly what you did wrong, Officer X. And if you use that section and it's a lot of subjectivity in it, then all you do is create a an argument for them not to be held accountable. Because you can't describe it. You saying I shall be, I must empathize and prove to me why I have to empathize with them. And then you lose your argument. Then the officer who did the wrong thing walks away on a technicality. So, but we want you to be kind. We want you to be professional. And if you're not professional, you're not kind, you have to tell us why. But empathize, I can't define that. And I don't think any officer has to feel like a victim to do the job. I think it's better to empathize with them, but I don't think you have to. I hope I didn't talk myself out of winning this argument.
No, I think you won the argument. You won me over, at least. The one thing is the should language. In our world, as you know, that should means I don't necessarily have to. So I don't know if we can, I mean, maybe we can just match this language that members are expected to demonstrate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that sounds better, because once you start making things ambiguous, you've opened up an avenue for the officer not to be held accountable.
Okay.
I just think it's a poison pill.
Certainly.
Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Hear you.
Oh?
We can hear you, Marcia. Obviously, she can't hear us.
Okay. All right. How are we feeling with that? Are we good?
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right. So this is going back to where we left off. These are the violations where only termination is the option, and we moved through these pretty efficiently. There were a couple that we stopped on to have further discussion. So the first one is 31439. This is the performance of duty planning of evidence. And if you recall, this was in a weird place because performance of duty encapsulated a lot of things. And there was just this really weird, and I guess I'll just show you here. Yeah. So if you look at performance of duty, it defines it here. And then you have unintentional illegal search and seizure, unintentional improper, then this random planning of evidence. And then you have somewhat of this catch-all here where it's failure to perform duties as required or directed by law, which has a pretty wide range. Improper care, but planning of evidence is a very heavy allegation that brings on automatic termination. So I propose actually putting in there a definition, and then possibly I kind of earmarked it for removing it, maybe having its own section if we find necessary, just so it doesn't get lost in translation. But I define it as the intentional act of placing, fabricating, or manipulating evidence at a crime scene on a suspect or among a suspect's possessions to falsely implicate the individual or alter the course of an investigation.
Perfect.
Can you hear
Right.
me?
Yes.
You can't.
Yep.
Okay, when you start listing things, people think that's a finite list, but it's not. So sometimes you want to consider saying to include but not limited to.
Yeah.
Because every time I think about the officer who said, nothing in there says I can't pay out of my pocket.
Yeah.
Hey, dude, That's really bad. So to include, but not limited to planting or whatever, however you started that sentence.
Okay, great. Yeah, makes sense to me.
Well, based on what you said, Marcia, in the description of that particular case, it seems to me that we ought to have something that says that their actions violate this manual rules or the rules of state of California in the United States, something like that.
Well, we
Because-
have to be able to find which one of those rules of the United States. See, when we
Well-
start saying stuff like
well,
that.
Wait, oh, I don't think that's too hard. I mean, if we take the issue of planting evidence, it's a felony to plant evidence on someone. And that's that. And I was just saying, I was bringing that up because in that case that you're talking about, or at least referring to, the officer said, hey, nothing in this document said I can't do it.
There
but
you
it's
go.
something but there was something in the state of California criminal, the penal code says you couldn't do it.
But are they trained in all of that too? Because that's
Yes.
the next thing. Okay.
Yes.
Hey, all right.
Oh, excuse me
Believe you,
for
Reg.
getting excited, but
I got you.
you know, don't. It amazes me that we even having this conversation.
Okay. Can you
Because-
hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you because
Oh, man.
I can hear you. We can hear you.
Oh, okay.
We heard you. I heard everything you said. I'm saying,
All right. Well,
Yeah.
I'm good with that.
well, hold on, let me finish. You know, we can't operate in making these corrective suggestions to this document as if it's the Magna Carta. It's not. It's just one behavior defining document on what we think is proper behavior for the Oakland Police Department.
Okay.
But we have another body of laws, you know, the state and federal laws that have equal impact on each individual officer. So it amazes me that an officer could say, hey, nothing in this document said I couldn't use my
Yeah.
own money, but the
Yep.
penal code of the state of California says you couldn't. And
Yeah.
why that officer wasn't brought up on those charges or charged by the DA, there's where the problem lies.
Well, it didn't get to the DA because he was cleared in IAD
But again, there's where the problem lies.
within the department.
The kind of the attitude that we're gonna bend ourselves over backwards to prevent anyone from being held accountable.
Yeah.
But this manual rules is not, you don't have to have everything in it. You do have you know, state of California penal code and all the other codes in the state.
Well, and that should be at the very beginning. While this manual is applicable to the Oakland Police Department, officers should be cognizant of the California state whatever and the federal state federal whatever.
Exactly.
And that should be at the very beginning.
Exactly. So no one can say, hey, you know, you didn't catch me in this book. Yeah, but
Yes.
you violated the penal code or the health and safety code.
So I apologize, Lieutenant. I mean, who are you? Who are you?
It's a fair question. Today I'm acting captain.
Well, acting captain. Precedes all of this as a preface. It should be you know, something that references the fact this is Oakland Police Department manual of whatever this is called, and officers should be cognizant that state and federal law also applies. Because that was probably the most audacious thing I'd ever heard. It wasn't in here, and therefore you can't hold me.
Lord have mercy.
Okay, yeah, I'll go back and look at our preamble and introduction and see if there's wiggle room in there, which I'm sure it is. I do want to bring attention to this section because it's not mutually exclusive. So let's just say we have a situation where an officer is being investigated for planting evidence. Being that it is a state and federal charge also, it would be two allegations of misconduct, to be planting of evidence and then all obedience of laws. So this section then mandates that we make a referral to our investigations division, which then would work with the DA's office. And they're not mutually exclusive. It's not one or the other, it's both. So
Okay.
one comes to the other, yeah. So this section is important because if it does fall within any law, felony or misdemeanor, then this is then investigated.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
I have another question. You said, could you give me an example of unintentional planning evidence? I get the intentional, but what's an example of an officer unintentionally planting evidence?
I do not have one.
I'm not going to even hazard to imagine what that is.
I don't know how.
I don't think there can be such a thing.
Yes, I agree. If first of all, you
Then-
know it's evidence. And
Then I
if
think
it's
we need to say something about that. This accidental or unintentional, whatever, has no bearing on the, accountable rules and whatever.
Well, in the
There's no
law,
such
there are
thing.
in the law there are intent crimes. They're charged intent as an intent crime. So I don't know where we're going with this. I
What, can
would
you give
think-
an example?
that's what I was
Well,
asking.
First degree murder is an intent crime, or you plan in advance. That's an intent crime. Where if you are in a domestic dispute with your partner and you pick up something and hit him in the head, you didn't intend to kill him, within the heat of passion, or sometimes choking crimes are heat of passion, not intent crimes. They're like manslaughter or something less than a planned crime, like laying in wait with a gun and you kill somebody. That's an intent crime. You planned it. But if you hit somebody with your car, and you're driving too fast, that is not an intent crime. Am I right, Lieutenant Hubbard or Deacon Lyles?
1000% correct.
Okay, because I'm not a criminal lawyer.
No.
But
That's it. And
yeah,
if you unintentionally plant evidence, and
I
I'm
don't- I
thinking
think
the only
that's
way
a-
the
yeah.
only way that could possibly come about is that if I picked up what I thought was evidence and I put it in my pocket or put it in my jacket pocket, and somehow the evidence fell out in some other place. I didn't intend for the evidence to be planted, but I am the one who moved it from one place to another.
Yeah, that's a
Now, see-
very narrow.
Yeah,
Yeah, that can't happen often.
no, it doesn't. And that's why when
Yeah.
I saw that when he had the lineup of the items of the things that are termination, he had intentional planting of evidence, unintentional planting of evidence. So how do you unintentionally plant evidence? I'm trying to think of a scenario. I can't come up with one.
I'm not hazarding to try to find that out either.
So
Because
why is it
certain
in
crimes are, I don't
there?
know.
So then why is it in there? Number one is my question. And does it hurt? Does it hurt more than help? If it doesn't help, then does it hurt us in terms of
Well, it gives an officer an an argument that would not have ever existed. Right? I mean, who ever heard of such a thing?
Yeah.
And then
And
I
they're,
said
you
planning
know, they
evidence. and
have
I should-
crafty attorneys, you know? It's like, prove the negative or whatever,
Yeah,
you
I
know?
need to correct myself because, thank you, Captain Hubbard. I said unintentional planning evidence, and unintentional is right below, right above planting. But if the unintentional or improper search and seizure or arrest, now that may be possible.
But not planting. Yeah, planting itself, I mean,
Yeah, so
the
I,
act of planting is an intentional act within itself.
yeah,
It's
I
an
misspoke.
intentional crime, yeah.
I misspoke. It's so my question then becomes, can you give me an example of unintentional or improper search and seizure or arrest? Unintentionally. How do you unintentionally arrest someone?
Wrong. You're in the wrong house. You got the wrong address. You have
Yeah.
shot Breonna Taylor.
This is a little bit outside the scope of good faith. It would be, let's say, an officer, and I'll take the extreme version of just arrest, and I can move backwards from there. But an officer is performing a file check on someone, and they make the mistake of misspelling the name or put the wrong date of birth, and it comes back with the person with the warrant.
Got it.
They use that to arrest them. You know, I mean, it was a mistake of how I did the data entry. It wasn't intentional to violate their rights. We get a lot of younger officers, especially, who get confused on searches of persons. So let's say there's grounds for a cursory search of a person for weapons, but then they reach inside their pocket instead. The intent wasn't there. It was their ignorance, and that would fall into that category.
Okay.
Yeah.
Feel better about it, man. Thank you.
We'll definitely come back to this section, performance of duty, in future conversations, because this one is used a lot. That being said, I did remove, if we're going to say planting is inherently intentional, just by
Yes.
then I did remove this, if that's acceptable. So this includes, but is not limited to, the act of placing as opposed to intentional.
Yes.
Okay. All right. 370.10, identification of undercover officer. We covered this last week. There were no further discussion, so I left that alone. 370.45, reports and bookings. Again, we had no questions or comments on that. 370.72, we did have a conversation. This is compromising criminal cases. I just added, so I'll go through the whole section. Compromising criminal cases, members, employees shall not, and we added this, use their authority to interrupt, attempt to interrupt, or improperly influence a legal process, engage in any activity with the intent to interfere with a criminal investigation, charging, or prosecution of any case, or fail or refuse to cooperate with an official criminal investigation upon direction of a competent department authority.
And this is a question. Engage in any activity with the intent to interfere. Isn't interfering, just by the nature of interfering, includes intent, right? Engage in any activity to interfere with a criminal investigation, charging, or prosecution of any case. If you're interfering with the criminal prosecution, do you have to have the word intent in there? Is the mere interfering of a criminal investigation has to have intent. Do you want to discipline an officer who's interfering in an investigation?
I do.
Okay, then why does he have to have intent? I thought I was helping out. No, what you were doing was interfering, and we don't want you to interfere.
Right. So I guess the question would be, is there a way for an officer to interfere with the lack of intent of doing so? Like, let's say they just they did something out of, I'll just use the ignorant word again. They did something out of ignorance, unbeknownst to them. They did interfere somehow, but there was no intent to do so. It's just
Then you discipline them at the lower end of the discipline level. If you find out that their interference was benign and just a mere mistake, etc. I'm thinking in the O.J. Simpson case right now, and in the officer who just interjected himself into that investigation and end up destroying that investigation. His intent was to show that, hey, I'm helping out, but nobody asked him to help out. He wasn't a part of the homicide team. He was actually working in checks and fraud division. So why are you even there? Why are you even showing up?
So this means if we do remove that, that means if there's any interference, regardless of intent,
right,
violating the section.
Yeah, and then you can have at one end of the spectrum this gross interference where you're calling potential suspects and tell them you better get out of town. They're coming, they're looking for you, or something like that. I would think would be at one end of the spectrum. And the other end of the spectrum would be, I'm showing up at an investigation and I'm walking through a crime scene. After you've been told not to do that. Why are you over here? We don't want you interfering. We don't want you doing any of that. You're not assigned to this case. So why are you walking through the crime scene, acting like you're helping out?
That's good. I'm thinking through everything you just said.
Yeah.
So are we suggesting then, so this is a class 1 allegation. Are you suggesting possibly creating a class 2 in addition to this?
What I'm trying to say, it's a wobbler.
Yeah.
If I could use that language.
Yeah.
But the word itself of intentionally doing plans, or that intent itself, is what makes it a class 1. So if we remove that, then we have to create room for a broader spectrum of punishment, it sounds like.
The other side of intent is that you have to prove the intent. And that's what I'm trying to get away from. I'm trying, sometimes proving the intent is the battle, and you can't prove the intent, and if the guy says, well, I didn't mean to do it, I'm a nice guy, and I've been working here 20 years and I didn't mean to do it. And okay, you didn't intend to, okay, so nothing happens. I think proving the intent is a hill that's too far. Why do I have to prove that that's what you wanted to do, to interfere? You interfered. You're where you don't belong. You're picking and touching things that you should not pick up and touch. You are calling people and saying things to them, even if it's benign. You didn't tell people they better get out of town. They're on to you. You're saying something like, maybe it's time for a vacation. When's the last time you've been to Mexico? You may be talking in code, and so you can't prove the intent. And so here's that Mack truck hole that we're driving or leaving into our disciplinary action. that people can defend themselves on. So I don't need intent. If you engage in activity that interferes with a criminal investigation, charging or prosecution of any case, I have to know the elements of what you did, and then based on that, that's would govern the kind of punitive action that we will take.
I mean, I think you're right. Compromising is a strong word too. When you compromise a criminal case, it's like you're swaying something versus there's obstruction where we're still going to reach the same conclusion, but I have to work harder as, let's say, the investigator. So I can see where obstruction is different than compromising, which may have lesser repercussions towards the to the officer. So this goes into gross versus mistakes is a kind of a weak word here, but okay. So maybe I can.
Maybe what you said earlier is right. Maybe we leave this one here, and then there's a class 2 type of interference. You know.
That's kind of more benign. Something that is acute versus something that's benign.
Yeah.
You showed up at a crime scene because you're nosy, and you close by, and you got out, and then you destroyed some vital evidence just by stepping on something or walking through a crime scene.
See, I have a real problem with somebody being that stupid and being a police officer with a gun.
Happens all the time.
Ooh,
Happens
help
all
me,
the time,
Jesus.
Marcia.
All right.
All the time.
And
Scary.
just to provide a little history, the first chair of the police commission got reamed for going to the scene of a crime and then making a statement to the news. So
Oh,
just for you to know,
Jesus
Ricardo.
Christ.
Okay.
That was. Yeah.
Yeah,
that
well,
was,
she was so media hungry.
yeah. That was.
No, it was he. It was a he.
Well, he was media hungry because
Oh,
we
well,
can do this work without being in the media's face.
And you're not an investigator.
Yeah, it's
right.
just
But it was
ridiculous.
just it was a role, perhaps an unintentional role problem, because he didn't understand his place.
That's it.
So I'm just sharing that from a commission perspective, Ricardo.
Well, I appreciate that. And I definitely won't be showing up at no crime scenes to
There
do
you
any
go.
investigations.
There you go.
I do want to acknowledge we are joined now by Risa in the audience as well. Welcome, Risa.
Hi, Risa.
Hi,
But
Risa.
you don't want to wind up being a witness to anything. You got to be objective. Be objective, kind of stay out of places you really don't need to be in.
All right. I will thank you for this. I will work on this more. 37081, we didn't have anything for this section, assisting criminals.
What does that
37
mean? Assisting, like after the fact? What?
Let
Assisting criminals.
me give you a ride to get out of town.
So this is a accomplice or some accessory after the fact, something?
Yeah.
Members and employees shall not disclose to any person attempting to commit a criminal act or who may be engaged in criminal activity any information that may assist him, her in committing a crime, evading arrest, or disposing of evidence of any unlawful act. We've seen this before where many years ago, officers were doing an operation on International Boulevard to combat human trafficking, and officer alleged to have told an individual out in that area, hey, the police are coming.
Lord Jesus.
Argument over whether that person was a criminal, of course, but still. And again, there's overlap here to where we're talking about, like we said, compromising criminal cases. If this is an ongoing, and that officer can be investigated for the 372 section and the 81 because they're also assisting criminals.
So they're accessories.
They can be prosecuted also, to your point, Marcia.
Yeah, okay. Hmm.
The Fleet of Mexico statement example is another, hey, I'm assisting you to evade responsibility. So we didn't have anything last week or 2 weeks ago regarding that. Now, next one is endorsements and referrals, fee is exchanged, 370.90. I'll go ahead and go back here just so we can.
Endorse.
So this means members and employees shall not suggest, recommend, advise, or otherwise offer counsel concerning the procurement of a particular product or professional service with whether or not a fee is exchanged. We were, I think, at least I was surprised that this is an automatic termination. I think it's one thing if I'm using my authority here in uniform and I'm endorsing a product to be purchased here for a friend, let's say, and I get a kickback versus, I mean, I read this as anything. So let's say I get a great haircut and I tell my fellow coworkers, hey, this guy down here gives great haircuts. Why don't you stop by? And I'm not getting anything in return, but according to this, I'm endorsing, referring. So I don't know if we want to expand on this. I just never seen this in my career, so I can't really give a good example of, but this is an automatic termination.
Well, aren't we limited to criminality? I mean, because of referral, as you suggested, like, hey, the guy down the street gives cheap haircuts and you're not getting anything in exchange, and it says whether or not a fee is exchanged.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Well,
So
and the professional services also opens up a whole other door, right? I mean, the whole nature of the ceasefire program is endorsing professional services and community-based services for folks to take, right? And so you have officers that are vouching for community-based services, and those community-based services will use those numbers to pursue their further funding, right? And so I don't know, it feels like a slippery slope.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, to your point, to be automatic termination.
Yeah, I think the intent was just to prevent officers to be on the take, to get paid by merchants.
yeah, but this says whether or
And
not
we ought to say that. We ought to say what we don't want to have, and still, instead of having these very, very broad catch-all.
Yeah, because whether or not a fee is exchanged, I mean, no fee is exchanged if I tell you, hey, Sears is having a great sale on refrigerators.
But
That's
if you've been paid by Sears to tell people that, then there's a problem,
but they're saying whether or not a fee is exchanged. I can understand it if you're getting a kickback.
Yeah.
But if you're not getting a fee, you're not getting a kickback.
Yeah.
What's the problem?
What's the problem? Maybe we need a second one here also.
Well, and would that violate like vendor procurement rules? Sorry, I couldn't say that word. Also, right, because you're supposed to get 3 bids for a vendor if you're suggesting your best friend's business, and then he's constantly, the sole vendor providing that service, then that could also be problematic. But I don't see vendors being specifically outlined in here either.
It seems like in this one we ought to define the most egregious act. Someone on the take, vendor compensation for the endorsement, and then somewhere in a more lighter section, and just say we expect officers not to refer people to businesses that would
In exchange for a fee.
in exchange for a fee. Yeah. And what we want to do is let all the merchants know that they're operating on an equal footing, right? We just don't want merchant A to get all the business because the police liked him or like their bit like him or whatever. We want to be fair with all merchants.
And then avoid any potential kickbacks on the back end too, right?
Yes.
Oh, I could eat or drink at this place for free because they get all my business
That's
from the
gratuity.
department.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then it ties into gratuity. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or you get free seating at my box for the, the game, something like that.
Right.
It's
There-
super
there-
interesting because, whenever I give somebody a referral, I'll always tell them, tell so-and-so I sent you. And that really doesn't mean anything except for there's a credible person that maybe has used that resource before. Because I'm not getting any kickbacks. But isn't it interesting how leading that can be or can sound?
Well, but you're building goodwill. There's a value to it because you're sending people somewhere and you're saying, hey, tell them Regina sent you. And that has a value at certain.
Yeah, it should. I'm just wondering if even a comment like that could be taken out of context
Yes,
as it
can.
relates to, yeah. So what do we do about that?
Yeah, this is a difficult one.
Yeah.
Because we don't want police officers going around to businesses and extorting people, saying, okay, look, if you let me eat here for free, I'll, or if you let me buy this refrigerator for half price, I'll post your business up on the bulletin board in the police station. You don't want to do any of that.
But I guess
So
you don't want to
members-
interfere. I'm sorry, go
I'm
ahead, Marsha.
sorry. No, please.
I was just going to say, we also don't want to interfere with the positive outcomes of that as well, right? If an officer is saying knows a particular business, I'm thinking of in terms of the lens of public safety or again, ceasefire, like the officer knows certain businesses are hiring or certain programs are good. And you could say, yeah, tell them Lieutenant such and such sent you. And, we want to look out for you. And that's also helps with public perception in terms of like, oh man, the police are really here for me in that way. Right. But would they be in violation of the rule the way it's written right now?
So is this really all about not leveraging your position as an officer for private benefit?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I think this boiled down to is just simple ethics. And I just to expand, I think I'll just research the city's policy because I'm pretty sure it's close to what's written here, but the intent behind it is more for personal kickback and just straight unethical.
Yeah, an officer shall not leverage his or her position for any procurement of a particular product or professional services for a personal benefit.
Yeah, and there's a different section of gifts and gratuities that cover, they can be big, but even smaller items like free lunches and dinners and things like that. It might not be endorsements and referrals, but it just talks about what you do when you receive a gift. So
Well, that's a reporting requirement. That's different than what it seems to be here. If you get something
Yeah,
over
there's a whole other
$50
section for that.
on reporting,
Yeah.
this has to do with an intentional leveraging of your position as an officer
To
for
endorse somebody.
for personal benefit. And that's the intentional part of it.
So
But Captain, this section right here covers the personal benefit aspect of it. Whereas
Right.
the other section we're just looking at is just the referral or endorsement itself.
Yeah,
The
Right.
reporting of.
but this section is not automatic termination, even though it can be pretty hefty, like for financial gain or benefit.
Wait a minute, members and employees shall not use their authority over the, see, you guys have a lot of redundancy in this stuff. And it's just, you've got so many leaves that we don't even see a tree anymore. Because here, this is almost the same thing. It's just a nuance. Or it might be a redundancy. I'm not sure. Because this also speaks to the use of their authority or position for financial gain or other benefit. The only thing different about the other one is it's professional services or some other thing, with two things named. Professional services or something. So.
Which is
think-
interesting because this one seems like the punishment for this should be more severe than just endorsing another service. Because this one clearly outlines it, is for the kickback, for that
Yeah.
gratuity or for that gift that you'd be accepting in exchange.
And that's what I was trying to define into the other one, but it's already here. All you have to do is drop professional services and the other thing that was mentioned in the other one, and you'll have it right here.
Captain, is there a way to
there's-
find out what the intent of the other one was? Because it really feels like that one is really solely for like referring to another like third party and not necessarily for your own benefit, for just doing it in general.
Yeah, I'll look further into it. I could not find a history of any of these, but I'm pretty sure it aligns with a city administrative instruction. I'm pretty sure they're closely associated. So I'll cross-reference those and see if
The
it was
two of these
standalone
is
section for it.
is the officer receiving something. And then the first one was referring customers to a business and subversively the possibility of receiving a kickback. That's why that's there in the first one. You just didn't want officers going around putting pressure on merchants, saying you got to give me something and I will refer people to you. And by the same token, you didn't want officers going around referring certain merchants over other merchants. You got a white merchant that has a bail bondsman. You have a black merchant that has a bail bondsman. You have a Latino bail bondsman, but the police only refer the white bail bondsman. I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just saying that, for example, you don't want them doing that kind of referring.
Okay.
I don't think we're going to be able to get rid of both of those. I think we need to define the first one better.
I agree with that. So I'll do some more research. I'll cross-reference it with what the city already mandates. And I will develop more. Okay. Subversive organization. This is 3470. We didn't really have a big discussion on this, but I wanted to define what subversive organization was. No member employee shall knowingly join, affiliate with, or support any organization deemed subversive with the intent to advance its unlawful objectives. This includes a group that seeks to undermine, disrupt, or overthrow lawful authority or engage in illegal acts against public order and safety. Membership or affiliation for such purposes is strictly prohibited unless it is necessary for the performance of duty and has received prior authorization from the chief of police. I can't think of an example here in Oakland. I know if you look at LA County, I don't think you can see this online. They have a problem with this right now. So I think it's very relevant to have this, but an actual
they're-
example here in Oakland, I don't have one.
Well, you know,
Arguably MAGA.
well, I'm gonna say in terms of the Los Angeles environment and what law enforcement, some people in law enforcement are afraid of, that is affecting not only policing, but sheriff's departments and jails and all that stuff. You got to put, you got to use the word gangs in here. You know, not just organization. What kind of organizations we're talking about? We're talking about nefarious gangs that engage in criminal activity, that that extort, intimidate folk. That's what we don't want our officers being associated with. But can a police officer be a Black Muslim? In my era, you could not be. And then slowly Muslims said, look, that's my religion. And then that all changed. But that's what we're talking about, right? We're talking about the fact that LAPD have been accused of having officers, and LAPD County sheriffs, including the sheriff, has been accused of being a part of, you know, Barrio 18, MS-13, in various gang associates in the LA area. Do we want members of to be police officers who are members of the Hells Angels? Do we want people to be members of any nefarious gang who has an intent on criminal activity? The answer, I would hope, would be no. So somehow that has to be included. There's got to be examples. Otherwise, this is going to get wild, you know. You're a member of a subversive organization. You belong to Kappa Alpha Psi, you know. And it has to be not just someone who thinks that's a gang. It has to be some documented evidence of gang activity.
With that it's subversive. I mean, gang,
Yes.
does the gang all automatically mean they're subversive?
The gang that I would describe would be gang, who's engaged in these kind of activities. Otherwise, I wouldn't call it a gang. But I'm not the Webster Dictionary, you know. But I have seen there's a difference between people who are part of an organization who are engaged with documented evidence in criminal activity. So, and we ought to give examples. And then I'm sure there are going to be new gangs forming all the time in neighborhoods and stuff that come up. And once they meet a certain level, then, you know, we don't want our officers involved with them in terms of as membership.
Is there a registry?
Well, the department, well, Brian, you should answer that.
I don't know.
Well, Brian, how do they document when someone is passing gang signals?
Yeah, well, we kind of work backwards from the issue. It's, are they performing unlawful objectives? Let's say yes. Then it's, is there a group of individuals who identify with a certain I don't get, I mean, a certain level of identification, and then the answer would be yes. So it's not a subjective, oh, they're just a gang. It's,
But there's a courtroom test, isn't it?
yeah, there is.
They use tattoos, they use behavior, they use criminal prosecutions, and all of that. That's what we have to have some way of including that in this. Otherwise, you'll have you know, everybody who you don't like being accused of being a gang member.
Right.
Like the alphas, huh?
Yeah, like I said, alphas.
Oh,
Around
Lord.
Bushrod Park.
The alphas, you guys, are a black fraternity. He is not an alpha. He's
No,
a
I'm not.
sigma.
I'm a sigma. I'm a Phi Beta Sigma. Please don't ever say that again.
Surprisingly, social media, it's a little bit easier to define.
Shame on you, Reggie.
Yeah. so I guess what I'm saying is that when I was growing up around Bushrod Park, we had a group of guys that we hung out together, played sports together. We still friends. We wore purple sweatshirts because Tech had purple and gold. We had purple sweatshirts, and we call ourselves the Mellow Fellows. So when I became a member of the Berkeley Police Department and assigned to the Juvenile Bureau, I'm going through the card file, and there was my name.
Ooh.
A member of a gang of the Mellow Fellows, Bushrod Park.
Wow.
And Officer Wallace Johnson, Officer Charles Blackwell, Officer Charles George, we all of our names were in this little card file that dated back to like 1963 when we were 13 years old.
Wow. Already profiled.
And we had no idea.
Wow.
But I saw that.
Wow.
So we got to be careful. We don't want to mislabel anyone, but we surely don't want our officers involved with organized criminally intentionally criminal gang activity.
That's why I asked if there's a registry.
Or politically subversive activity.
So is there a registry at the state level?
There's not, and it changes every day. I mean, social media can quickly define a new gang overnight. Just, it's
very mercurial.
Yeah.
And things pop up all the time.
Right. And as like Deacon Lyle said, I mean, there's gang enhancements, for example. And for us to do that, it can't be arbitrary. I mean, it has to require evidence, but also expert testimony to get it across the goal line. And it's just not easy, because moving the opposite direction, one could say, oh, it's just a group of friends, and we're not a gang, and
we go hunting together.
That's right.
Captain, is there a term that defines a group or gang that has already gone through that litigation process and has been like stamped, okay, this is an official gang? Or that there's a lot of fluidity with that as well too. But I get and I guess what we're saying here too, to Deacon Lyle's point, is that we want to be able to protect that senior softball crew that's playing at Bushrod,
right? And
then them telling an officer, well, you cannot play in that softball league because they're associated with this Bushrod North Oakland gang or something, that may be associated with Bushrod Park or something. So yeah.
Okay, I'll develop this more. And the other thing to look for here is it says support. So it's not even just active engagement, but if I'm a donor financially, let's say, that would fall under this category.
So that would
Wow.
also include not only participating in these organizations, but also acting or doing things that are for the benefit and on behalf of these organizations as well.
I'm supporting them, and it doesn't say anything financial, just supporting them, whatever that may mean. I would be in violation of this. Yeah, all right, good discussion. I'll come back to this and
That seems to violate free speech there. I don't know.
But you know what's interesting? That did not prevent creating a kind of dossier on a whole and a few young people who played together at Bushrod. I mean,
Yeah,
creating
this-
a file.
And we were actually part of this group so we could learn manners. You ought to etiquette, how to say yes sir, no sir, and how to ask the girl to dance and all this. That's why we were going. That's why we were part of the group.
Hey, everyone. Risa also has a comment in the chat. She says ADL's identifying some pro-Palestinian groups as anti-Semitic that some of us Jews would not identify as such. Would this catch officers in this dilemma?
Yeah.
That's interesting. So would this apply then, Captain, to political groups or folks that may, if you have a certain political leaning and you go to a action, or I don't know, is there already policies against that?
There's a disrepute section, but sticking to this, I think I guess we can develop this more. It would be a group to undermine, disrupt, or overthrow lawful authority or engage in illegal acts against the public order or safety. So even if, let's say, society determines a group to be, quote, a gang, if there's nothing illegal about it per se, or they're not undermining, disrupting, overthrowing lawful, I just don't think this would apply. But also, I understand what's being said here, because we want to protect those where there's overreach also of calling someone a subversive organization when that's just not true. There's
And
throwing
Teresa's point, especially within the political context.
right.
Well, subversive, the definite subversive has to do with overthrowing governments and systems. So
It's like the January 6th people.
exactly.
Yeah. But are we saying all? I think that's the argument some people will make. It's like, I wasn't there to undermine, disrupt. I was just there demonstrating my First Amendment right. Yeah. I'm going to look into this a little bit more. Being that this is relevant in certainly larger organizations, I'm sure they have more to offer here. So I'll look further into this. Great. All right. Refusal to testify. We did not have any questions here, but since we have some new viewers, I'll go back to that. We can look at it. 398-48. Okay. Member or employee who appears as a witness before any competent investigative body, judicial tribunal, hearing board, or person authorized to compel testimony, and who refuses to testify shall be subject to disciplinary action.
These people have been subpoenaed, or
I'm actually thinking this in terms of the CPRA. Like, let's say the CPRA orders an officer to testify in an investigation. I think there are multiple allegations that can be lodged against them. This is one, but also interfering with the internal affairs process. And I can argue even insubordination at that point.
Okay, I
Yeah,
can see where you've listed it out. Competent investigative body would be CPRA, where are authorized to compel testimony is a court. Or an arbitration, maybe.
yeah, that
Okay.
could be too. Yeah, I mean, it's one thing that you, I mean, it's interesting how you bring that up. It's like, does it have to be a subpoena? It doesn't say that here. You know, if
Authorized to compel
yeah,
is a subpoena.
is that it says they're authorized to compel, which would then mean that they have the authority to subpoena, but it doesn't say subpoena. So can one say, I didn't receive a subpoena, an email is not good enough, so subpoenas, can I avoid responsibility here? I guess is how I look at this.
You could look at it that way, of course. So we could also, judicial tribunal. That's usually a court and they have subpoena power.
Yeah, but which they would subpoena. But what if
Yes.
we have a situation where, let's say the CPRA emails me, we want you to testify tomorrow, and I refuse? Can I then say, I'll agree that you're a competent authority, however, you did not subpoena me, therefore it's invalid?
No, because it says a witness before any competent investigative body, judicial tribunal, hearing board, or person authorized and who refuses shall be. So SIPRC stands all by itself under the competent investigative body,
Right.
I think. It
I
doesn't,
agree.
yeah, they don't have to subpoena anybody. They
I agree.
are a company, yeah, okay.
Okay. I don't have any examples on this. I can't think of an actual case. I think the most dynamic word is refusal. So there's an intent behind that, as opposed to ignorance, where let's say the email went to a different folder, and I didn't see it. It's a straight refusal. But again, this is heavy, where the first offense would be termination. Okay. All right, interfering with investigations. This is 39870. The only note I had on here is it still shows the CPRB where it should be the CPRA. And then I also added any external investigative body on here. Any other questions on that? All right, retaliation. I don't know, sir. Let me 39873. I'm sorry. I forgot why I wrote notes here. I'll read this and I'll go back to my notes here. Under no circumstance says shall member or employees retaliate against another member, employee, or any other person for engaging in protected activity. Members and employees shall not engage in any adverse action that would cause a reasonable member, employee, or any other person to be deterred from engaging in a protected activity or is based on retaliatory motive arising out of a member, employee, or any other person engaging in a protected activity. Any member, employee who becomes aware of such conduct shall immediately report the misconduct to a commander, manager, and or directly to the Internal Affairs Division. The presumptive penalty for violation of this section shall be termination. I know what I did. This did not encompass everything about the city. It's this one right here. It's the Public Ethics Commission. So we want to give people the option also, of course, of reporting it directly to the Public Ethics Commission that we have here in the city. So it is immediately report the misconduct to a commander, manager, the internal affairs division, and or the public ethics commission as appropriate. Our policy mandates that we do report it to internal affairs, but this also gives them the option of adding on the public ethics commission. That's what that was. All right. Any questions on that? And then truthfulness, we didn't have anything for truthfulness. 398.80. So those are the 11 out of the 80 offenses where the first offense, if sustained, would be termination. And we left off with the next group of 17, where the first offense has the range of termination, where it's up to termination. That's actually. All right, so how are we feeling? Do we want to jump into these?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I was going to do a temperature check with folks and see how folks are feeling. I know we got this was on our list, and we were going to start diving into these, but then we really just took a step back to really further discussion that we just had right now, specifically around empathy and all that, because last week as well, folks weren't there. And so, I do appreciate that further discussion and being able to really tease that out even more and feel like we landed in some good places there tonight. And so just want to see how folks are feeling with these 17 now, or do we want to start fresh with a new meeting, diving right into these for next week? You said there's 17 of them?
There are, I think I just added one, 18.
Well, let's go as far as we can until what this is over at 8. Right?
It's,
Chair?
Yeah. Yes.
Today?
Yeah, we do have 30 minutes. We could start knocking some out. Is there a way to determine which ones are the most frequent?
I can just do it by looking at them here.
Would folks be interested in that?
Sure, that's a way of parsing them out.
Okay, so
Workplace
let's
violence got to be at the top of the list.
see.
Which one?
Workplace violence.
Ooh,
Yeah, I don't, sure.
insubordination, certainly.
You don't get a lot of
Ooh,
these, but I will highlight it here. Well, let's
number
just start with
10.
that. How about
Number 10.
say that again? 10.
Number 10.
Again, I don't know most common, but sure. Yeah.
Oh, they don't.
What's going on down there at that police
Well,
station?
yeah. Okay. Well, let's start
Get
with
a room, get a room.
this one. We'll do conduct towards others, harassment and discrimination, which is indeed a common allegation, 314.04. Okay. This is a rather long one. Members and employees shall treat all persons with courtesy and respect. The department has a zero tolerance policy for harassment and discrimination against members, employees, and persons on the basis of race, religion, national origin, marital status, age, sex, sexual orientation, ancestry, physical or mental disability, or medical condition. As I read that, by the way, I don't know if that captures everything in the new laws, so I need to make.
Oh, yeah,
It
doesn't.
And by the way, I know we talked about this before because in our previous ad hoc regarding racial profiling, we created our own standalone section. So
Yep.
overlap there, but it's not now the same or will be the same as this. I'll continue. The department prohibits conduct that violates a specified city administrative instruction, which would be AI 71. Any member employee who harasses or discriminates against another member employee or any person or engages in any inappropriate workplace conduct that violates City Administrative Instruction 71 shall be subject to severe disciplinary action, including discharge from the city service. Any member employee who has knowledge that another member employee has engaged in harassment or discrimination or inappropriate conduct that violates this specific city administrative instruction is strictly charged with the responsibility for reporting that conduct in accordance with the provisions of Manual Rules Section 31448, reporting violations of laws, ordinances, rules, or order. So the first note, of course, is making sure that this list encompasses all, and I don't think it does just by looking at it. So I will make a note to look into that. All right, so the issue with this, and I believe I said this before in our previous ad hoc, is this is an internal policy, not external. So if someone from the public accuses me of harassment, which happens to police officers just through affecting Fourth Amendment seizures, one can argue this does not apply because we're talking about an administrative instruction that it looks inwardly, not externally. Thus, I think getting to what we came up before with is a separate section on racial profiling. However, not necessarily, it has the tenets of harassment and discrimination, but might not be the same.
So that last paragraph, failure to report, given that there is a strict responsibility for reporting, what happens? There's some other provision that speaks to what happens to you when you don't report.
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll go there. No. Oh. No, I know it's here. Let me see. It's this one right here, 31448. So this is reporting violations of laws. So if I know about harassment, discrimination, and I fail to report it, regardless of rank, it's just you're an employee here, then I have failed to report misconduct, which would be in this section.
Okay, but it says which indicates a pattern of misconduct.
Right. So that's specific to class 2s or any class 2 which indicates a pattern of misconduct. So there's class 1s which you have to report, period. Class 2 you have to report
Okay.
if there's a pattern. Yeah.
Okay.
The other interesting thing about AI 71 is that the city recognizes that OPD has an internal investigative body. So they do not require, or they do not complete an independent investigation. They say, okay, OPD, you're reporting this. Thank you. You you have an internal affairs division and the CPRA. We're not going to touch this.
Okay.
And going back to the other one, how does discrimination apply to like discipline or promotions? Specifically, since we have a task related to that. Right here, this harassment discrimination, yeah.
Well, this is a class 1, which would invite significant discipline, but the first offense is not termination. Task 46, I believe, the NSA, where if one is sustained, I don't think I mentioned this before, is if one is alleged or to be, sorry, if one has been sustained for a class 1 violation, they are not eligible for promotion for 1 year.
Mm.
Yeah, I don't have really anything on this section that stands out. I think our separate MR for racial profiling specifically, I think covers it. I
Mhm.
just do want to look to make sure that all of the categories here are covered, and I have a note to do that. All right. And maybe this is too much pressure on everyone to read and think through this. So I think in preparation for our next meeting, I'll send this list out again with the manual of rules, and then you have some time to look at them in advance before, so we can prepare. 31405, conduct towards others, workplace violence. In order to provide a safe and appropriate work environment, the department has zero tolerance for acts of and threats of violence. Employees and members shall report threats or acts of violence or intimidation between members and employees to their supervisor. Supervisors are responsible for immediately reporting threats, violence, and intimidation to the Internal Affairs Division. The following terms are defined as follows: threat, an expression of intent to hurt, of intention to hurt, punish, intimidate, etc. A threat of violence includes threats against people or property. Violence, intentional physical force used so as to cause injury or mental or emotional harm. Any questions on that? Okay. 31430, this is insubordination or refusal to obey a lawful order.
Does that ever happen?
Which
Insubordination.
it has.
Okay.
It actually comes in the form of what we talked about before, where it's a refusal to testify. Usually there's some, we'll go over the definition, but some authority told you to do something and it's like explicit, not the supervisor told me to do something, I didn't hear it properly, or I meant it's the I am refusing to listen to what you're telling me to do, assuming that it's lawful.
Yeah.
So let's see here. Failure or refusal of any member employee to obey a lawful order given by a superior officer or court of law constitutes insubordination. That's it.
That's kind of plain spoken. I mean,
Mhm.
Yeah. Any questions on this one?
Hmm.
32807. Prohibited activity on duty. Oh, here it is. Members and employees are prohibited from engaging in the following activities while on duty: sexual activity, sleeping, loafing, idling, conducting private business, carrying of articles not associated with the performance of police duties, or gambling unless to further a police purpose.
So let's talk about comparing that to the other specific one that said sexual activity.
Yep. Yep.
Right? Wasn't there one that I asked you to highlight?
Yeah,
the
no, this is
10?
it. Yeah. It's this, so it's 32807. I know this is similar to the planning of evidence discussion where it's just kind of put in this group.
Yeah.
That's it. It just says sexual activity, which is prohibited on duty.
Well, but you just left one that said sexual activity, didn't you? Another provision that listed sexual activity we were talking. Of the list, remember I said, oh, number 10, sexual activity.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
just before this, you jumped over to this one. The one we were talking about before, didn't it also list sexual activity?
so maybe under harassment and discrimination, which unwanted activity. This one I
okay.
think is, even if it's consensual,
Prohibited.
I know it is, even if it's consensual, it's prohibited. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, well, it's a great example though of like, I can do both. I can be harassing, discriminating, and violating this, which is sexual activity on duty. The question then is, of course, do we want to define this now more? We are still, I know this came from the OIG to develop a sexual misconduct policy, which we technically do not have. I just had a meeting today with the city attorney's office about that, and we have a plan moving forward, but still not completed. It will, of course, include this.
But see, this is the one that gets violated the most. This is the one where, officers get in trouble for fraternizing with prostitutes, intimidating them, getting sexual favors for not being arrested, that kind of intimidation and harassment, all of that. That's the one. This is the one where officers get into most of the, get into trouble. That makes national news.
Yeah.
And it's not only police officers, but sheriff's department and jails and all of that stuff. This is the great quicksand. So we should. This is a serious one.
Yeah, I think we can expand on this more, what this means, and maybe the new policy will do that. But it's like, what is sexual activity? Does it have to be an act, or it can be information that's coming into me. Like if I'm looking at pornography on my personal phone while I'm at work, is that sexual activity? Or I'm sexting with someone, is that sexual activity?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't, if you, I'm less, I have less concern about someone looking at pornography. I just don't have a big movement on that. But if you're engaged in some kind of personal engagement, whereas electronic or physically touching someone or speaking to them in a sexual way to intimidate them, that's what we're taught. That's where we should make sure we focus on, because that's where folks are getting the most abuse. You must do this for me, or I will have you arrested.
Yeah.
You must do this for me, or or I'll let you continue doing what you do for a living.
Yeah.
And
Or
of course,
possibly,
this is the one where we got the biggest scandal in the history of Oakland Police Department, or at least in the top 3, was with what's her name? The Abu Ghraib.
oh, the
Celeste Guak. Yeah.
guac, yeah.
Well, yeah. That was international news.
Mm.
So, and it involved a lot of officers, a lot of different agencies, DA's offices. So we need to make sure this one is written well. If you and the city attorney is doing something new to that, we should look at that also.
So we can reverse engineer this. We can wait and for that policy to be written and then return to this and expand on it based on what that policy says.
When do you think the policy would be completed?
We're still in the early stages, and a lot of it had to do with Michelle Phillips leaving. It did fall off the map for a little bit, and then just today we're bringing it back on. So I know the city attorney's really been doing a lot of research on best practices. Chicago has the most elaborate policy. So we're trying to find middle ground there. But I don't think it's going to take long for us to put it together once we do the research. So I'm hoping within the next few months we can get this done.
I don't know if I would want to wait months for us to do what we need to say about this.
Yeah.
I mean,
And I think the policy is going to speak a lot to the non-criminal stuff. And that's, I think, everyone can agree that using your authority for sexual favors is a crime. And we have not only this, but of other sections to use then. But it's what if it is consensual? What if it's just inappropriate? Those areas where someone who's, not too aware on values and everything else can easily say, well, it was consensual. I don't see what the problem is.
on duty.
On duty. I mean, what if
On duty is the problem.
If I'm investigating a crime and I strike up a conversation with someone and I get their number, does that cross a line? And I
don't. I don't. I think
it could. Anyway, I think that policy is really going to flush all this out, and so we're working on it.
Okay, if getting somebody's phone number cannot be considered a sexual activity, because we can go so extreme that we end up shooting our own foot off.
Sure.
Getting someone's phone number, asking someone for their phone number as a police officer, you do that 10,000 times a year.
Yeah, but under color of authority, you're in your uniform. I'm afraid not to give you my number if you're the officer asking for it.
Then then there's actions that can happen because of that. But how do I know what the officer's thinking by asking her for a phone number? We
It's
assume
outside of this.
that is sexual.
Well, it's outside of why he's here. He was here because somebody stole my bike. I'm
If-
just saying.
If I'm coming to your house, somebody stole your bike, I still got to ask you for your phone number.
Yeah, I meant the more intentional, like I get your phone number, we strike up a conversation, I'm now sexting you, let's say, and it all kind of originated with me as a police officer just investigating a crime, but as a result, I mean, it does influence, or it could influence the outcome of this case, and all these different things.
That's why I'm trying to make a distinction between asking somebody for their phone number. But if you asking somebody your phone number while you're investigating a bike theft, that's normal and natural. If the person who gave you the phone number said, he asked me for my phone number and he was over here on a 484 of a bike, that's not a criminal act. That's not sexual activity. Now, if he starts sexting you, now we've crossed the line. And I did say any kind of engagement, physical, electronic, or whatever, in a sexual manner, that could be prohibited.
Sure.
I just don't see, if we say, oh, you can't, if you ask somebody for a phone number, they can accuse you of sexual impropriety. That's going to make officers so paranoid. Wait a minute. I got a section here that says phone number, victim name, address, phone number.
Okay, well, what are the examples then of asking for, is it just post giving you my phone number in the natural process of reporting a crime versus you using my phone number inappropriately?
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And again, we said on duty.
Yes.
Now, let's say you give me your phone number on investigating a petty theft. All right. And then I call you a week later and ask you out for coffee. And you say, I'm not interested. And that's the end of it. Then I call you again. Now we're over the line.
I think you over the line when you called and asked me for coffee. Not again, but the first time. Using my number outside of the investigation to ask for a personal meeting for personal reasons is the offense, in my opinion.
Okay. See, here's where we're gonna clash here.
Okay.
Okay, police officers are human. They do have rights as a citizen. And if I call and I publicly speak to you, I have the freedom of speech to say, you seem like a nice lady. I'd like to take you out for a coffee. And you say, thank you, but no thank you. That's the end of it.
I just don't.
But I haven't broken any. I don't think I've broken any laws or any regulations that I should be held accountable for by the Oakland Police Department. You mean to tell me I can't call somebody off duty and ask them for a coffee?
No, because I didn't give you my number for you to give me coffee.
Then you
go
say,
out for coffee.
Then, okay, Marcia, then you say no. Then you say no. And that's
when they call me.
You have a right to say no to me. That ends it. I have a right to hear it, and that ends it. But I haven't broken any OPD regulations. I don't think, if you say that you've broken an OPD regulation just by calling somebody in off duty, then again,
I don't know.
then am I a sub citizen? I have a right to free speech.
I think But I do think there's issues of like labor law and like harassment issues, and I think that, you know,
Name
well,
the labor
one, I'm
law.
wondering if that's the uh-huh. Well,
Name the
one, I'm
labor
wondering if that's
law.
the intent of this one, of this particular
Well, I don't think we have anything here. We just have sexual activity blank. And so and then we got to
so
wait
we got to
2
define that for
months.
sure.
We got to wait 2 months for the city attorney to
Oh.
get it worked out. And then I said earlier, we need to look at that too then, because I'm saying if you make these things so rigid, you're going to find out you're going to have a rebellion. You can't say that a person who's off duty calling somebody and asking them for coffee because he was a police officer somehow has violated someone else's rights. Now, etiquette, I get it. To your personal standard, it may be, that's untowards. Then you say to me, no, that's the end of it.
I would find that creepy scary that I called you to my house to report my bike was stolen. And
Right.
then you call me later and say, can we go out for coffee? I didn't give you my number for that.
Well,
I
then
gave
you-
you my number to report to.
Well,
You get to say that to me. You get to say that to me, and I better hear it. And you also have the option to go down to the police department and say, I feel creepy, scary about, he made me feel creepy and frightened because of what he did. Then here's where the lieutenant comes in and the sergeant comes in, and this is where there's some counseling. Officer Lyle, you shall not do that ever again. Consider yourself counseled on this.
See, I'd be scared
right.
to just have that police officer mad because I called his lieutenant and said, this creepy guy, I gave him my number because I'm reporting my bike stolen and he thinks he can use it to call me and ask me out. I just
Then let
think
me
it's
ask you another
creepy
question.
scary.
Should we write policy based on a individual or 10 or 15 individuals who felt creepy and scary? And then on the other hand, you got 500 that said, I'm glad you called me.
You get to make your own date stuff, not during your duty time when I'm reporting a crime
No,
to you.
I
That's
didn't say-
my opinion.
No, and that's
so
okay.
we may have to put a pin in this discussion. But I did
Well-
want to note, though that this 32807 is specific to on-duty behavior, right?
That's what I'm talking about.
We've been kicking around the off-duty scenarios for a second now, but I do think we need to further explore this a bit, for obvious and various reasons, Captain. And also I think, we also noted that the sexual activity itself, we need to further define what that is. But again, even though there's a process going on with the IGs and having its own policy being written, I think for the purpose of this, we could just be a little bit more clear and maybe even, see if it ends up aligning and informing what ends up coming up on that end as well.
As always, I
But
appreciate
you have the last word then. All right. I'm gonna tell you, you guys are gonna get yourself in ACLU problems.
I just
I
don't think
definitely-
you have a right to use my number outside of why I gave it to you.
And I agree with you.
Don't be hitting on me while I'm trying to tell you about my bike.
Okay, that's you. That's a person. That's Marcia. But there may be 15 others who don't see a problem with it. And it's
Okay, it's not a dating game when I call you to my house.
Listen.
Okay, all right, I'm done with
If
it.
yeah, okay, you're done with it. I'm not.
I don't want to. I'm okay. I'm done.
If you're saying I am offended, that's where it stops. That's where you're going over the line if the officer calls again. Up until that point, an off-duty phone call to another citizen is free speech. And I'm telling you, you're gonna have ACLU problems with that.
You wouldn't have my number unless I gave it to you in the course of your doing something official.
I don't
And
think
I
that's
only
it.
gave you that number during the
Well,
course of
you
you
gotta
doing
you gotta
something
find me a
official.
statute in the law in the federal law or the state laws that says once I get some information in my brain that I can't use it. That's free speech. That's what free speech is.
Yeah, but you know what? You don't have a free speech to sexually harass me and some of that other stuff. So why do you have a free speech to use my phone number when I only gave it to you on an official report?
Using your phone, calling anybody on their phone, calling someone on their phone one time is not harassment. Continuous calling, conversation about sexual improprieties, intimidating, that is harassment. One phone call is not harassment.
And you know, you might be right about that, because it does have to be somewhat of a pattern to be defined as harassment.
Exactly.
You get one free swipe at it. I get it, but I just figure that somehow you've gone over the line. But this is not what we're here. I'm just saying.
That's exactly why we're here. When you have sexual harassment, semicolon, blank. And that's what I was trying to put some meat on it. That if you're going to talk about this, and Captain Hubbard said we're doing it in the city attorney's office, fine, work that out, come back, and we need to look at that too.
Okay.
And so we can put some meat on. I think on duty, intimidating people, putting your hands on folks, threatening folks by arrest or not arrest, or giving them some certain favors, etc., looking the other way if you do this or that for me, all that is on-duty behavior. That's a problem. That is sexual activity that we ought to be prohibiting. What you do off-duty, is governed by a different set of rules.
Well, I think
Follow
we
the
beat that
Constitution.
one until 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you think?
Yeah, we definitely need some further discussion on this, and and I'm also asking myself questions just in terms of I'm also trying to think about just certain situations and specifically because I'm thinking a lot of the scenarios that we're teasing out, are they covered in other policies that we've already talked about in regards to harassment, coercion, and intimidation, other things like that, where I'm wondering what the intent of this specific one was right here. And it just feels like we definitely need some more information on this. Because I'm also because every time I read it, when it says prohibited activity on duty, it's also like for me also making me think of like, is this between coworkers, consensual things? Like it almost feels like it's calling that's the intent of this versus the harassment piece, right? And or is this intended to be a catch-all be-all? So there's a lot of questions and we are definitely at time. So I think this is probably a good place for us to pick up for next week as well. It looks like we got some homework to do on this one as well.
Okay.
But I appreciate the fruitful discussion as always. It makes these late night discussions a lot interesting and they're always, just as we had the last discussion, the more we tease it out and continue to build on it, we end up landing on somewhere pretty good. So looking forward to further discussions on this.
All right,
all right, then I think we will leave it at there. And we'll see everyone next week. Captain Hubbard, any final thoughts or I kind of want to go around. I know we just had a good spirited conversation, but you feel okay with where you're leaving off and some of your tasks for next week?
I do. I'm not going to be here next week, so I hope that Captain or Lieutenant Durham can fill in for me. I'll be in communication with you and Micah about that, but I definitely will get my homework assignment done so you have something to review before next week.
Thank you. Thank you,
Okay.
Acting Captain Hubbard,
You're
for
welcome.
your dedication. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, we'll see you guys next week.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, it's
Bye-bye.
been charming. Good night.
All right. Have a good night.